Hello, good day. We are about to give you the Star Soccer Review assessment of the Trinidad and Tobago CONCACAF World Cup Performance 2025. Just before we released this video, we got information that the CONCACAF World Cup campaign for 2026 has been released for the Group B. Group B we consider as the Caribbean group that has Jamaica, Curacao, Trinidad and Tobago, and Bermuda. And let me just tell you, on behalf of Star Soccer Review and Caribbean Stars, there's a saying that you wouldn't know where you're going if you didn't know where you came from. I think most of us heard that saying. And the performance of Trinidad and Tobago, we hear a lot from Dwight of the games that his team played. I'll give my version of what I think the team may need, if anything. Now we're going to get into the 2025 CONCACAF World Cup, where Trinidad and Tobago played 3 games: USA, Haiti, and Saudi Arabia. We played a press conference of each one of these selective versions of questions and our assessment. As for those who don't know or not aware, Trinidad and Tobago qualified for the World Cup by getting past Cuba. They played in Cuba where they won 2-1 in a come from behind victory, and then returned to Trinidad to enjoy a man advantage very early in the game and destroyed Cuba by a score of 4-0. These were the World Cup preliminary games. We had some press conferences, and in the press conferences going into the game in Trinidad, I managed to get a few questions into Dwight Yorke. The first one was seeing that they won 2-1 in Cuba. I just wanted to know with a little history of the so-called Warriors, whether he was thinking of a draw, which would have put him into the Gold Cup, or he was going to go to the win. You would hear how he answered that in the first press conference.
Coach, always going to give Star Soccer Review. In regards to the game tactics, we're in a sticky wicket in terms of, you just mentioned going in for a draw. We've been in these situations before. How are you going to approach this game? You came from behind the last game. Is the team going to be prepared for any scenario?
No, I think we prepare as normal. We want to win the game. That's our approach. Hopefully fully aware that a draw does get you through, and often enough we tend to have a real habit that we need to win to qualify. That is not the case. And so, looking back and going back on experience, and certainly now being in the position of the head coach, those are some of the things that we have to address. And ideally, winning a football match is what everyone hoping that will be the outcome, and we will play in that manner. But ultimately, getting a draw, it's a success, right? And it's all about qualifying for the Davis tournament, and that should be sufficient enough for us to qualify for the World Cup. So yes, on the one hand, a draw is a great result. On the other hand, we want to win the football match, and we will play it in that way.
And there's a second press conference in the post-game press conference. In moving forward, I like to find out the headspace and just ask him if he was aware of the level of play or the caliber of play in the CONCACAF region.
Congratulations. In moving forward, I know coaches go game at a time. With you, congratulations, it's tournament at a time now. Are you familiar with the overall CONCACAF, the level of play that the team would have to go to, and how you think you'll prepare the team and how you guys will be moving forward?
Well, I do have some sense of what it takes because I've been there. So I have that experience behind me, and obviously it's different being the head coach. But the reality is, you often tend to look at opposition like Jamaica or the Costa Ricas and the Mexicans and America. I think we have always had talent. There is no question about it. Trinidad and Tobago has always produced great talent. They know how to play major tournaments, they know how to win games at the international level is something that we like. I think I can say that I have a little bit of experience in those departments as well. And my job is to improve those players, right? And let them understand what it takes. And that is my job. We can't be too worried about the rest of the CONCACAF region. We have a vision. We want to qualify for the World Cup. That's my vision. We've got to be focusing on that. We've got to make the home advantage a huge thing, because that's where you win and lose in terms of qualifying. And if teams are knowing that they're coming to Trinidad and Tobago and know they're in for a very, very tough time, that's what I want to create. With people, the fans, the people coming out and support. Every team that is coming in here to Trinidad and Tobago must know it's not going to be an easy ride. And I think if we can start to create that sort of mentality and that win mentality, then these opposition teams, no matter who they are, will understand that they're in for a really rough time. And that is what we try to create.
And of course, knowing he was a player, and with all the confidence and the success he had, he said that although he wasn't a coach, my whole take on it is that seeing that I've been covering the CONCACAF religiously for over 20 years, Dwight could not be quite aware of what he was about to face. But with confidence and as a player, he know the cookie crumbles, he know how the dice roll. I think that part of the experience he can handle. In qualifying and looking at the schedule, obviously they were drawn in Group D with USA, Haiti, and Saudi Arabia. Obviously they played a friendly to Saudi Arabia. That was going to be the last game, but the first game was going to be USA. I saw that as a very tricky situation where I wasn't sure, after watching the team perform for 3 games, I wasn't sure that they were really up to that level, but it would have been interesting to see how they handle such an opposition. Again, these assessments come in with Dwight analysis and Dwight views on what transpired. And obviously, as you know, Dwight is very confident and he gave a good assessment of the games, and you would hear him in the press conferences. With the US game, it was basically a blowout. It was 5-0, and Dwight would tell you what his thinking was at that particular time during the course of the game.
To introduce our head coach, Mr. Dwight Yorke, to my immediate left. I remind you that for questions, you can raise your hand and introduce yourself with your name and media organization to the one you represent.
Hey Dwight, Declan Fulton from OllieMunder.com. What were you hoping to take away from today's game, and how do you prepare for the match against Haiti?
Well, we know that coming into the game, although a lot of hype around the American team in terms of the results hasn't been particularly gone their way, we were not under any delusion that the fact that this game was going to be arguably the toughest game in the group stage, and of course we prepared thoroughly, trying to maintain and frustrate the Americans as long as possible. And obviously when you conceded 16 minutes. I felt that once we conceded, the game had settled down a little bit, and I felt that we would have been able to hold off America until halftime, because we needed to make some changes, some tactical changes. And then, of course, when you look at the goals that we sort of conceded, 41 minute and 44th minute, you know, those are two gifts. And so at 1-0, we felt that we would have been in the game. And of course, yeah, it snowballed into, then from there on, we were always going to be playing catch up from that point on. I felt second half we did a little bit better, and of course created 1 and 2 chances, but the game was already over. And then when you reflect on, it's just a bad day at the office, I would say, and we need to put that behind us very quickly, because there's 2 more games to go, and you know, with 2 more games to go, certainly we gotta win maximum points against Haiti, and that would be the intention going forward.
The second game with initially I thought that the best game, if Trinidad was serious about moving forward in the group, that they would have had to defeat Haiti, and that's prior to even playing the USA. In other words, Haiti should have been, although a difficult opponent, a beatable team, or a team that they could compete with. So I decided to go to Houston, where I felt the heat wave, but that was just for me in a different climate. But I guess for Haiti and Trinidad and Tobago, that should not make much of a difference, although they had some stoppages, some water breaks in between each half, around the 30th minute. The Haiti game, it exposed a few flaws in the Trinidad and Tobago setup. The game started with the usual, each team feeling out to see how, but very early Haiti got the better of the Soca Warriors, and it continued from there. Trinidad trying to find a way, Haiti finding their way more times than not, and the whole turning point of the game was that Haiti got a red card in the latter part of the first half, which is reminiscent of the Cuba game in the preliminaries to qualify. Trinidad and Tobago couldn't make use of the man advantage. Into the second half, Haiti was still having the bulk of the possession of the play. Things were going in their favor. I was hearing the supporters behind me. They were talking about, they were very impressed with their team play, in that Haiti was looking like it was even Steven, both teams were at 11, or even if Trinidad and Tobago could have been a little short. And that was the whole thing. So Haiti went ahead 1-0. And I guess that was the indication for Dwight to bring in new players. With Gil and Molino coming in as subbing, the game changed right away. As you would hear him say, the changes turned the game on its head, and it really did. You know, Molino was controlling the play, he was getting most of the ball, he was moving left to right, and was really good. Trinidad equalized, but Haiti got a penalty, and luckily for the Trinidad and Tobago, it was missed high over bars. The game went on where Trinidad was kind of trying to see what they can do with the man advantage, but to me, almost reminiscent of the Cuba game, you know, they failed to really dominate the play. so much so that they, even with the little edge in the possession after Molino and Gill came on, the overall time of possession was maybe about 53-47, in favor of the Soca Warriors with a man advantage for the better part of a half. So that is something that Dwight Yorke would have to work on. I mean, that's pretty fundamental that, when you have a man advantage, you spread the ball. It is very simple. Maybe not to do, but it's a simple theory. You spread the ball and you let the opponent work and you wear them down. Bottom line. How that is not done, that from since, high school or junior football. So anyways, that was the end of the game. The game ended 1-1. The Trinidad supporters, they were happy with the equalizer. And all in all, it was, I would think, a missed opportunity for Trinidad and Tobago and the Soca Warriors. With a man advantage for the better part of a half, it should be more than. And as Dwight would say, he maybe don't want to admit, but you can hear in the press conference, post-game press conference.
Welcome to members of the press to the post-match press conference. Trinidad and Tobago versus Trinidad and Tobago. Dwight Yorke said you identify yourself and your media organization before we take questions.
McGill from Caribbean Star Soccer Review. How you assess the performance of your team with all the different scenarios that played within the game?
Yeah, we felt that coming into the game was always going to be a tough ask in terms of what we know that Haiti was going to provide in terms of the physicality, the strengths in wide areas. I think first half wasn't really at the races. The players really find it difficult to get going. We couldn't get a foothold into the game, and so to speak. And I have to give Haiti a lot of credit in terms of how they played first half. But we know once they had the man sent off, the advantage was slightly in our favor, although they seem to still have a foothold in the game, and to concede like we did at, certainly in the pretty much, I'm not sure what minute it was. So that really sort of knocked us back a little bit. Well, we know going into the second half, we had the advantage, so we needed to play a little bit more aggressively in terms of our attacking play and take responsibility and have a little bit of courage in how we play. I felt we was a little bit naive going forward. As I said, I give a lot of credit to Haiti in the first half. Pushed us back to our goal, and we couldn't really sort of deal with the long ball. That was causing us a lot of problem. But once they got the man sent off, we felt like the advantages is swing in our favor. But then, of course, the concede is kind of knock you back a little bit. But I thought the reaction from my players towards the end, once we made the substitution with the captain of Molino and introduction of Real Gills and those guys, really, turned the game on its head for us in many respects. And as I said, even though we're a little bit fortunate with the penalty miss against us, we felt that we'd done enough to get at least a point from the game.
It seemed that only Spicer was the only aggressive attacker. Is that an issue you noticed, or maybe he just was the only one that felt confident enough? And even a man down, you guys can see the penalty. Is that something you need to talk with the team? Is it an organization issue?
Yeah, well, listen, we are still in the learning process. It's not something that these players are used to, the demands of the game. Spicer, when you look at his record, he's not playing back-to-back games like he had been playing. So that's something new for him and the demands of it. So, he's a terrific player. We can see that when he's really positive and play on the front foot, you see the creativity he can cause a lot of problems to defenders. I think that belief needs to be a little bit more installed in him in many respects, because he's a threat. He's a defender's nightmare, and I just think that he needs. I think those type of players need to affect the game throughout, and not in spells and moments. So he's have a 5-minute spell, then he may go missing for a 15 or a 20-minute spell. I think the learning curve, as any top player is being impact in the game. Yes, manage the game. There might be a moment where they're going a little bit quiet. For someone of his ability and quality and what we rely on down the left side, he should be impacting the game a lot more, in my opinion. And that's just down to a little bit more confidence, a little bit more belief in his ability, because he's certainly a threat when he's in full club. I think sometimes we're a little bit naive. We work on a lot of, systems and playing, but ultimately the players have to go out and really play in a fashion that we know that they're capable of playing. We always encourage to play on the front foot. We always try to get players to be creative going forward. I felt like in the first half, it wasn't creative enough. People wasn't taking on the responsibility, like they were afraid in many respects to make mistakes. And I tried to get my players away from that mentality, to be on the front foot, to play in a positive way, to push teamwork towards their goal. But what we done, obviously, with the man advantage in our favor, you've seen a lot of players showing, a lot of players wants to get on the ball, and that's what we need from the very beginning, not when we, sort of have the advantage in our way. But I have to defend my players in many respects, because they are still in the learning process. I still think, I'm relatively new into the job. I'm not making an excuse for my players, but we have to grow up very quickly. We have to be a lot more physical. We got to be a little bit more demand. When you're playing at this level, it's a lot of physicality as well as a lot of, energy that you play. And so we need to bring that to the game a little bit more. I think we become a team who relatively easy to play against, because we are, a footballing sort of team, but there is a physicality side of it that we need to be a little bit more aggressive. And that's something that we certainly talked about, and we're going to have to improve on that if we have a chance to.
Trinidad and Tobago needed help because they only had 1 point. Saudi Arabia had 3 points and played USA when they actually tied with Haiti. So you would hear Dwight was being hopeful that I guess USA would win the game against Saudi Arabia that was playing later that night after the game, and so that Trinidad would have a chance to go for all the marbles against Saudi Arabia in the last game to get into the quarterfinals of the Gold Cup.
Tonight, not really ideal for us, but what it does, it gives us an opportunity to try and advance, again, pending on results between Saudi and America tonight. So we'll be watching that game closely. As I said, we look forward to the World Cup campaign. We know that what group we're in and the team that we are coming up against, and we'll be preparing for that when that moment comes around. But for right now, as we speak, as we are right now, we are looking to just maintain and trying to advance out of this group.
Dwight got his wish. USA defeated Saudi Arabia. So it was down to, as far as I guess the so-called is concerned, winner take all to advance. Now, when you listen to these post-game press conferences, Dwight is pretty close to being on the button with his assessment of the game. He doesn't, sugarcoat too many things. He tried to always keep a positive spin with his players. A couple of questions he had that I think I should touch on, the way he answered it, is he was asked about Spicer and being the only aggressive player in that game, in the Haiti game, and he gave his breakdown for Spicer, but that Spicer should be controlling a little more of the game. He's just, controlling a small part of the game in squads, and he should have longer control within the game. He gave him what he was thinking, but what Trinidad and Tobago supporters like about Spicer and what they had enjoyed over the years with Trinidad and Tobago team is that players with the ability to take on are exciting players. People pay the money to watch the team because these players show that the opposition isn't that hard to get by, and it's just a matter of just scoring the goals after getting by them, which is not always the end product with Spicer. But I think Trinidad and Tobago supporters are very much enthused. The big question for all the Trinidad and Tobago supporters, and I think Dwight should know that, and you can see that's the way he operates in the team, is Kevin Molino. It is beyond me why a player that is not overweight or whatever is having problems in playing the majority minutes of a game. I don't buy what he's saying. I know he had a little run-in with Uncle Steve, the previous coach, but it is true if you watch his game, and he has to be honest, he's not as effective for the majority of the minutes of a 90-minute game. And as a result, the coaches are not giving him 90 minutes, and they're still trying to find out which is the most effective end. And Molino had a hell of a game in the Haiti game. So I suspect, based on that, that might be his role. I know he played a different role in the first game and the second game, but all in all, if you look at his effectiveness, it's in limited minutes, and no player really want limited minutes. But as a veteran, he has to understand that that's the way he's performing. It's kind of baffling under Dwight Yorke, because when I covered the Bahrain series, that Trinidad and Tobago was playing to qualify for the World Cup in Germany, Dwight, around the same age that Molino is, was doing extra training after the practices. So I don't understand why Dwight cannot instill something in Molino, or Molino doesn't have the pride based on the touches and skill that he has, the pride to know that he needs to be better conditioned. If he thinks he's conditioned and he can play a whole game, he's fooling himself. He's not as effective for 90 minutes because he's dropping his stocks. And that's just my take on it. Everybody might see it different, but I go to watch the games. I look at the effectiveness of that player in the game. So with the tie and going into the Saudi Arabia game, winner take all, Trinidad and Tobago, they did well. They went ahead, first time in the tournament. They initiate. I think Dwight must have done a good selling job to motivate his team.
Again to the press conference, match day between Saudi Arabia and Trinidad and Tobago. Head coach of Trinidad and Tobago, Dwight Yorke. We open the floor to questions, and then we switch over to the virtual forum. Opening question for Yorke.
Hi, coach. We've seen a tough game today against Saudi, and how do you see the whole match from your point of view?
Well, I think that we were, when the group stage was selected, we know that we were into a very difficult group, with the host of being America and obviously Saudi as a guest under the PIF. So we knew that we are one of the underdogs alongside Haiti. So we was under no delusion that this was going to be a hard campaign for us to get out of. But nevertheless, at the end of the day, the experience over or during the Gold Cup was invalid for, as far as I'm concerned. The experience for my players who've never been in this position before, those 3 matches that we played, despite the defeat against America, despite the draw against Haiti, and of course Saudi, I think it will be the experience maybe for some of these players, I won't say of a lifetime, but in terms of improvement, in terms of them going forward with their playing career. In relation to the game today, it shows that we fought all the way. We got off to arguably the best possible start that we could. But we know that at some period of the game that the Saudi, with their quality in possession, that they was going to always, come at us. I like what I see from my players, the odds against us, and to hold out and play in the manner that we did, and as you mentioned, to have the opportunity to possibly win the game and qualify at the very death. It would have been a lot of unbelievable achievement for us, but it wasn't meant to be. But I think we'll take a lot from it going forward as a team, as the players will gain that experience, and we look forward to the World Cup campaign next, because that's the next big thing on the agenda.
Do we have a further question? Andrew, you have one more? Yeah, go ahead.
Okay, so one last question. But moving forward, obviously the team will have to process. And, I spoke about this last time about the mental aspect. And you, having been someone who has played at the highest level and experienced this sort of campaign before, heading into the potential preparation for the World Cup qualifiers, I have seen some progression in a good way. Mentally, how would you, what is the approach mentally going in, speaking to the players after a game like this?
Well, I think if you have to assess the 3 games that we played in this tournament, America, of course, who is a standout candidate, they have won all 3 games in this qualifying system, shows that the gap between us and America is much bigger than I thought. So there's work there to be done. But obviously, the response in the last 2 games, despite a lot of people think that we may have lost the game, although we had taken a point from Haiti, and then of course taken a point from Saudi. So there's, as you mentioned, there's a lot of positiveness. I think what it tells you that, or gives us an indication, not just as backroom staff, but as also as players, that the work, when you play at this level, there is no respite. You have to work hard and you have to work beyond. You gotta have to commit 100%. And once the experience of being in such high competition will no doubt, which is the new era of Trinidad and Tobago, the new faces that people are still getting familiar with, will put them in a good place going forward. So there's no question in my mind, having coming off these experience being here at the Gold Cup, that when it comes to the World Cup campaign in September, this experience of being here will be valuable for us, not just as a team, but as a group, and understanding what it takes to be at the top. So I'm quietly confident that the players have benefited enormously, although the result may not suggest that. But the learning process and these players to develop to the way they should be will then give them an indication, and they will have a 3 months still now where they can now reflect, understand how hard they have to work.
But we know what the coaching ranks is. If you don't get the wins, if you don't qualify for the tournaments, you are expected to qualify, or people think you should qualify, you're open to criticism. And you saw the game now, as I said, the team played well, they initiated, they went ahead, and they stayed in the game, and that's the last game they played, and because they didn't qualify, because they needed a win, and although they had a couple of chances towards the latter part of the game to get the win, at the end of the day, it was a 1-1 game, and Saudi went into the quarterfinals with USA out of the Group D. But the progression was good for Dwight, from the lopsided loss, 5-0 to the USA, to maybe some people think it was a substandard 1-1 draw with Haiti, but it was a point, there was no loss, so he's meeting somewhere in the middle. And then there was a draw. Yes, it was also falling short, because a win would have put him forward, but again, it wasn't a loss. Now, I'm putting it this way, it wasn't a loss because I think the Trinidad and Tobago supporters are not really even comfortable with not moving into the quarterfinals. It's been a long time. The last time the team was in the quarterfinals was under Stephen Hart. So, sometimes Dwight talks like he's coming with a clean slate and nobody achieved things. And for me, who covering the Trinidad and Tobago and the Caribbean teams and covering CONCACAF a long time, I don't really say much, but if that's what floating his boat, and motivating him to motivate his team, then by all means, but I know what I know, and I also know he's doing a good job. There's no one out there who could say that he's not. You're seeing the progress. Whether it's going to be fast enough or not, seeing that the team didn't advance in the Gold Cup beyond the group stage. I don't know what he did with the Trinidad and Tobago game against USA. Going into that game, we were hearing it on the US network that the Trinidad might pose a little problem based on the history of USA and Trinidad and Tobago. And also the fact that Dwight was quite aware that USA was under a little pressure for underperforming in the Copa and these things. So you would have known, or they should have known, that they were going to play a hungry USA team that was going to take no prisoners. There's no two ways about that. But as Dwight Yorke says, they have time to correct those things, and hopefully they get the right friendly games to come out of that group. The assessment for Trinidad and Tobago, promising. Dwight, assessment for Dwight Yorke in the leadership role for Trinidad and Tobago, for me, is the only person right now could really take the country to the next level. So there should be nothing to criticize. It's just the areas that need to be improved. The defense coming out the back, that confidence, how we do that, you just have to make them do it over and over and over and over. And the midfield, that coordination with the midfield, because if the midfield is not showing the way they should, then it's going to pose a little problem for the defenders. And that means they're just going to have to hit it down. And maybe that might be the best way for Trinidad and Tobago. Most people now, if they're not sure and they want to see what the other team is coming with, they just touch it off and try to get one of the flankers and defend it from there, just probably to see what's the strategy on the other side. Dwight and these guys have to tour around with a lot of things because they are lacking a little confidence coming from the back. I think the back, yes, Phillips' save, he was ranked about 5th or 6th with number of saves in the tournament, based, I would think, about the level of the play of the team. But let's be honest, and the same thing happened with Canada and Qatar. Even to clear the ball sometimes when it's coming from a wing back, you can see the forward closing in, which is a sign of a keeper just starting to get along in the years, and Dwight and them should know that. I know a keeper is an important thing, and you need to have confidence in a keeper within that net. But this is the time in friendlies and stuff, they have to start looking for a younger keeper and one who could use his foot effectively to get that ball, jumpstart that play, or do a restart from a goal kick. So that's my assessment of the Trinidad and Tobago team. There's something real airy about Trinidad and Tobago under Dwight Yorke. There seems to be history in the making, if what I'm seeing comes true.